I really like Sherman tanks. The question is, why do I like Sherman tanks so much? And the answer is, they worked.
The facts speak for themselves.
They've got the job done, and in a large part, they were responsible for the success of the Allies in World War II. Transporting Sherman tanks is a logistic challenge they thought of from the very beginning. Not only was the United States separated from most of the battlefields the tank would likely operate on, they had to transport them there, and they had to transport them around the country. You had to design a machine that could fit on rail cars, that could be lifted by dock cranes, and could be put into a common ship. You had around 32 tons, you had a certain size and shape within 20 feet, no more than about 10 feet high. I mean, literally, they had to make a tank that the crane could lift. Now, this is not an argument that just says, because we won, we're right. But the facts are, you have a tank that has interchangeable parts. It has a production engineering design that allows it to be expanded, it allows it to be corrected, it allows it to be modified very simply. Ordinary people can learn how to work on it, and you don't have to ship it back to the factory every time it breaks. It does a lot to project your force, which is the job of a tank. Many of the techniques they used in World War II are still used today when it comes to lifting tanks on ships, but the tanks now weigh 70 tons. One of the big developments was ships that they could roll on, roll off. Ramps in the stern, just let the vehicles drive on up and drive on down. And that absolutely speeds up the process. Most of the time you'll see Abrams tanks or anything else modern from the United States on the ramp of one of these ships. All right, we're getting off topic. My topic today is shipping them, because I'm going to use it as an analogy for the packaging and shipping of our tanks to go to a battle. The reason I bring it up to you while sitting in my car is it's a typical situation where when I go to these battles, you've seen me load the car to the gills. Well, now we're going to talk about the boxes and the crates and the cases and all the other things I've tried, and what I personally think is a fairly economical solution. My first real shipping issue was a milk crate. I put the vehicle in a milk crate. But then later I realized everybody else was using either toolboxes or handmade wooden containers. And some of the members of the Scat Club in Southern California were very nice, and they actually gave me two. One meant for Shermans, one meant for larger tanks. And I still use them to this day, 20 years later. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Alan. The ones that are more of the old-fashioned toolbox didn't stack. The squared ones stacked fairly well. But I went to Walmart and Ace Hardware, various other Home Depots and Lowe's, and always looked around for toolboxes. And the first one I always found was the 24-inch standard little plastic toolbox. Some were Husky, some were other brands. It didn't matter what. But they were very simple, very plain, and they fit on average a normal Sherman size, Panzer IV size, Panzer III, even up to a Pershing if you crammed it in. Wow. You know the guy's speaker's too loud when your fillings hurt. For those of the tank hobbyist community that had mostly big tanks, the 24-inch toolbox often doesn't work. You end up damaging your gun tube and you don't have enough room. Well, we used to find the 26-inch, 28-inch, or a box that we've lovingly called FatMax. This is a 28-inch toolbox. You find them at Home Depot, Lowe's, those kind of places. This toolbox is meant for when you have a tank that's very big. So in this case, I have my Super Pershing in there. Notice the super long gun tube and a radio and parts, and it works pretty well. But this one is meant for king tigers and panthers, if that's what you like. It even fits leopards, even fits the Leopard 2 and the Abrams. I have traveled far and wide with many of these. Some of these are 20 years old. So the very first trip I ever took, I actually repacked the tank in its box, kind of like this Crusader. It was a T-34, and I flew to California with it and competed with the Scat crew at their field in Rancho Cucamonga. That was actually, I could get it on a plane, and I got no questions. They gave me this box. As you see, it fits the Sherman. Right now I have it with a chassis in there under construction. The whole idea is this tank fits a Sherman perfectly, and on the back of it, it has the thing for radios. So normally, it depends on whatever radio you got, but click, boom. So I've used this tank carrier many times, and what I usually do is the ones that I have in progress go on here while I work on them. As you see, I got the electronics stashed in there and a few necessary parts like the receiver, and in theory it gets done. I was actually really cool with this. I was able to paint the DAK logo on there using a template, so that's one of my favorite little carriers. Not too long after that, another member of the crew actually gave me this one. It's meant for bigger tanks like a Tiger, for instance. Now this one's a little more difficult design because, as you see, the arch of it doesn't allow you to stack many things, but this was really good for putting into a car. There's enough room in there where you can slip a battery underneath the front. In this case, I usually hide an apple underneath it in the back, and there's a peg in there to hold a radio. This design is great. Now it's showing its age. I just found out this today, so I may put a little fastener on there and keep it up. I love this carrier. I've had it just as long. It also has a custom design logo on the back. These toolboxes were my second phase. I got these at places like Ace Hardware or Tractor Supply or Orchard Supply in California. This is a 24-inch toolbox. Take the tray out, and this fits a tank up to including. This is my T34-85. See, I put foam in them. I usually put a pad in there for them to sit on. It's good for the suspension. And this is a sample of a tank that's in here. Now this fits Shermans. It doesn't really fit a Tiger or a Panther or anything very well, but this is really good for this generation. One of the reasons I like them is they were relatively cheap. They were about 15 bucks each. They had a little box you could store things in. My problem is this is glued in because they kept falling out, so I had a problem. If you open up this box, it's about 24 inches, 22, 24. It fits a Sherman and a radio pretty well. This is a Taigen Sherman, and I put foam in it, same as the others, and it has enough room, pretty good size, and it is stackable, although you do lose the use of the boxes if you stack it. During this time period, I had one toolbox I came across. This is a slightly different design. It's a little wider. Now this has got my Hellcat in it. This toolbox was just sort of something I was inherited, and it was fun to put the Hellcat in, so I did. So this is my Hellcat box, and I was able to logo it, and I could put a label on it. So I typically take the foam and put the apples in here so that they're secured, because I don't want them to bust off. Now in this case, this particular tank has a special apple, so it has an impact set in here, so that's why I use it. So sometimes you need a box that fits a very special tank. Now in the case of this one, this is actually my Israeli Sherman with the M51 with the 105mm gun. Notice it's a Sherman, so it's relatively small, but it's got a very long gun tube. So this is a 26-inch toolbox. It's kind of a one of a kind. I haven't really seen it much. It was originally meant for saws, I believe, and big sturdy handle. So that fits in there with a radio. Now this is another example of it. I found this toolbox. It's another Husky. It has a lid. It actually has a little toolbox inside for spare parts and all kinds of things. What's interesting is the way this opens up is like this. Now I have one particular tank. This is my SU-122 scratch build that fits perfectly in this one little toolbox. And now this is a pretty common Husky. This is a 26-inch toolbox that I found. This was at Walmart, I believe. It fits bigger tanks. So this is an M48. This is 18th scale, so it's a little smaller than normal, but as you see, it fits a larger tank gun tube and still fits the radio. So this one also, all three stack very well. Easy to use. This is the most affordable. When I first purchased it, it was probably about $19. You can still find them somewhere. All right, now we come to my latest generation. These tanks and these boxes fit together very well, and they're actually able to stack, which is the key. So Rigid sells a series of tool cases and toolboxes that came out in the mid 2000s, 2010ish. So this box, as you see, is basically a parts box and a tool holder, and I use it for my battle days to carry like one screwdriver, some glue, some paint if I need it. If things break off the tank, I just throw them in a tub here, and it holds some glue, figures, and parts if I need them. This toolbox is actually what I use for my electronics and tools. So batteries, charger, once again spare parts. Right now it's a GoPro part collector, but we're getting there. Also spare things, spare electronics. I have tools, charger. You can separate them out if you need to. And it's very useful. Plus, like I said, it's relatively low profile and it stacks. This is their tool case that's actually a crate. So as you see, it fits a Sherman just right. My usual, I put a foam block in there. You can store something like a little tool or a battery or something. You can put foam on the sides if you want. And my DX5 radios fit just right. Now I typically take the apple out because when the tank's in here, you can get crushed. So that leads up to their version of the toolbox, which is here. This is their Rigid toolbox. So as you see, this one holds my typical Sherman. And what I usually do is put a radio in here. I also sometimes, I'll put the foam from the Tamiya Battle Systems up into here. And if I choose to, a more safe option is to store the apple up top. That way it doesn't get smashed when you close the lid of the box. All right, well the secret to all this, they also include a larger one. As you notice this, it actually is liftable, and you can put other things in here. Now right now I have Lego robotics in this one. But the point is that you use this for a big, you can put a tank in there or all your tools. You can take this crate, put it on top. You can lock it in. You can lock it in. Lock it in. You can take your crate, put it on top, lock it in, or lock it in. And then these guys, you could use, for instance, your parts box on top of the crate and use it as a lid to the crate. Now you're ready, take your stuff back to the car. On my way. Now, they're not perfect. I have had a few disasters where I lifted from the top and the arms disconnected and Sherman spilled everywhere. But for the most part, it also stacks in my garage and they're easy to label. Now, as I mentioned analogies, just for fun, I went through the shelves and found parts of a Sherman, and I want to do one that was set up in shipping condition. So I want to have it with the waterproofing on it, all the stowage boxes of the external gear, and basically everything sealed up. Just fun. Why not? As in mastic all over the seams, parts all locked down, storage bins packed on top. So I'm working on it, trying to put together what looks like the giant shipping container situation they usually had. Trying to scout. These are old scavenged parts. Here are some Mato idlers, and then modified with a Tamiya idler mount. It's all cosmetic. I'm actually going to use some old Mato sprockets that were. These are some tools that we actually made to adapt Tamiya transmissions for VVSS track combinations. So I'm just going to use those to bolt on the sprocket. Usually I put a piece of wood in here, drill a hole in it, and that's good enough. I'm going to use it as a training aid or a conversation piece, or who knows, even a contest model. It's going to be in the shipping container format. Basically, it's going to have no details, covered in mastic, covered in waterproofing, and as if it was on the ship. So these are all Tamiya parts right out of the parts box. I'm just clearing out the parts box, all the odds and ends. You can see I've got some from an old set that belonged to a Super Sherman. Some of those parts, and then just regular Tamiya parts. One of the things that Tamiya always forgets is on the 105 howitzer, it had 2 extra holds, lifting hooks, lifting eyes, lifting brackets on them on the mantlet, and I add them from spares. Those are literally the same part as that, just I found 2 of them at the bottom of my bin. All that stowage, that's value gear. Our good friends from Flagstaff, Steve Munsell. See, most of these tanks had a travel pack with had all their accessories and extra things. Stowage that was intended for the European theater. Remember, Sherman tanks actually carried a lot of stuff. They did have a crew of 5. You'll see famous pictures of all the stuff lined up outside the tank, the order of equipment that the thing used. I'm going to paint these to look like wood, and we're going to get that started right away. There you go. Steve's stuff's pretty good. Assume that's a camo net. Got some extra boxes. I also built this wooden deck, because if you see a lot of the tanks, they had a wooden deck on there to hold the stuff in. Obviously, the Sherman tank being at an angle would have an unnatural lean, so put the box there, and it's ready to ship. So it's that day that you need to start taking down your Christmas ornaments, and I'm gonna do a little painting while I'm at it. January 4th, and it's 65, 70 degrees and beautiful. Kids away for a Girl Scout thing, and I have some time, so here we go. Khaki. This haul was an old project I did. I took the Mato plastic VVS suspension and I put it on a Tamiya chassis. Now, I never quite got them to work perfectly, but they looked okay. I have my upper hull. Remember, I started to experiment with the mastic. This is not perfect. This is not a static, perfect model. This is meant to be in stowage, so. There we go. All right, this effort's brought to you by TruColor Paint. This is a local Arizona paint company. They are based here in Phoenix, and this is a color of olive drab that they put out as a large can. This is their olive drab. This is their olive drab 1942 to 1944 spray. This is one of the colors that they actually consulted with us. We went to the museum in El Monte and sort of gathered some surviving paint chips and sort of said, hey, why don't you try doing this? This is their formulation. This is basically what I've been using since testers went away. So this is going to be my base coat for a mid-war Sherman. So the howitzer version of the tank came in later in the war, and the idea was the 75 mil low velocity gun was great for its infantry support. Well, they said, why wouldn't a 105 millimeter be better? The tank was made by Chrysler. It was actually the first one to have the full 47-inch front slope of the glasses. And as a matter of fact, they made 800 of the radial engine version, and then 800 more, 850 or so, with the HVSS suspension. So Tamiya's kit, out of the box, represents one of 841 tanks. So out of 57,000 versions of the Sherman that were out there, it's a little bit of an odd duck, but it's a reasonable starting point. All right, now I'm gonna put a gloss coat on this guy so I can decal it. This is where I really miss Archer transfers going away, because I would make a lot of custom decal sets based on their dried transfer decals. I'm gonna use some testers gloss that I had left over. This, I believe, is still some of the currently made product that you can find in some hobby stores and Hobby Lobby, for example. Now remember, this is the gloss so that the decals sit, you don't get any film showing through. Mostly the spots where the decals would be. Turret, hull, transmission cover, hull, turret, maybe top of the turret, rear. Yes, I'm always curious when I put gloss on a tank. For the decals, you'll see. It's hard to mask and use spray paint for fine details, but I'm gonna give it a try. Here's the wood case with the bags on top, which I'm calling the camo nets. I used some blue tape, I ripped it and tucked the edges around underneath. I'm gonna give it a try. Nice coat. I can obviously pick up the details later when I'm dry brushing or cleaning it up, but I think it's worth an effort. I'm gonna put some decals on this soon. First, just to show you, I have a few pieces to be some height adjustments. I have my case. Now these would have been made out of plywood or something, so the balsa simulates it very well. Goes over the engine deck. My two big old dirty crates. Like some of it. Point is that it's adjustable, and the final configuration I'll figure out when I'm done. I'm going to put some decals on these things, very basic. When they were shipped, a lot of them had multiple stencils with the equipment condition, if it had batteries in it, if it had fluid in it, if it had any other combustibles in it. In this case, I'm just going to do the stars and I'm going to do the serial number, and it's going to be very, very simple. I still have to do the waterproofing and the mastic. I just want to do the decals first to get an idea what they would look like. So I'm going to use a set of Tamiya decals. These have been at the bottom of my tub for a while. If I run out of inspiration, I'm looking around for some older Pershing decals. They had more stencils on them. But I'm also going to take advantage. I have some of these old sheets. I got this from Dean Godden. I believe it came with the Vandra M10. I have an Vandra M10 right here. I was going to turn it into a Achilles, but that didn't happen. And so might repurpose some of these decals. For my decal work, I use some distilled water. I like to use the Mark Fit for Tamiya. I'm using Tamiya decals. I'm kind of low on this, but it should be enough to get me through. You're trying to achieve a painted on look, and there are ways to do it. So I'm going to put that in there. Just save that. A lot of the howitzer tanks ended up in the headquarters companies of these battalions. The idea was it was fire support for the tanks. If the tanks got into trouble, up comes the howitzer, the artillery is already there. Earlier days, they used M7 Priests, but in this case, it was nice to have the vehicle as part of the unit. It often had the same mechanical advantage to having spare parts, etc. Ammunition being different was the only I see as obvious problem. But then again, by the end of the war, often you had 3 or more different variants of a tank in a different unit, depending on how many had survived the battles. I used a paintbrush to move my decals around. Now, one of the things I'm working on is I'm actually working on the sand skirts to go along the whole side of this tank. I'm trying to copy the ones I have for my desert Sherman.
All right, these are the serial numbers for the tanks. There was a coding system involved. If a number started in 3, it meant it was a tank or armor. All right, sometimes you lose a corner of these stars and there's not much you can do about it. So it's okay in this case because the mastic is going to come all the way up to here. So it's usually where it was, right about there. That side right about there. Fortunately, I've built a lot of Shermans before, so I got extras. I took the front, the star usually there. Now, I've seen on some tanks that were being shipped, they used to put the shipping number on the nose too, so why not? All right, for the cosmetic gearbox setup, I'm gonna put a piece of wood across here and drill a hole in the end and stick the sprocket into. That should work. All right, my first experiment with the mastic. This is just tissue paper with water over the existing hole shape, and I will overgo that with dark gray or black. Of course, the night I was originally working on this, my GoPros and my phone batteries all died or ran out of storage space. So I kind of finished a little bit of this ahead of the curve. So this is a midpoint in this build. I threw some tracks on it from the old storage bin. These are the tracks with the duckbills on them. They typically fall off of my Sherman, so I use narrow tracks. All right, here's a somewhat after action shot of the mastic on the tank. It could use a little improvement because it was a little smoother in real life, but I think it's a pretty good look. I'm using literally the oldest paint I could find. Now I know that sounds odd. I'm using a water-based paint that I've had literally for 20 years. Believe it or not, this paint is the old Delta Ceram Coat. The stuff you get at Michael's. It used to be like $2 a bottle. It's acrylic paint. This particular bottle is copyrighted 2003, so I've probably had it that long. It leaves a nice little flat effect like it's painted on. I'm gonna do a couple more coats to build up the layers, but I just, as you see, they put it around the turret ring and the hatches. So far, it's a pretty good look. Still have to do this part, do down here. Just a little bit of fitment. Turns out that this metal hull pan was bent, so I gotta make some adjustments in here. Now to build the rail car to put it on. Yeah, just putting it on thick to try to fill the seams, like the real project. This was literally mopped on from what I've seen. I forgot to put the hull connection points in here. That's just an oversight on my part. I can fix them. I have plenty of these guys floating around. There we go. Getting better. It's the biggest deck load I've done so far. Thanks, Steve. It's the crack of dawn here in Phoenix. It's time to get ready. Time to load the car. head to battle day. Got some of the crates ready to go. This is my stack. Let's start loading. Big guys go first. Super purging. M48. M51. There's a 4. Firefly. So not too crazy. Hopefully we'll make it without breaking any laws. Trunk is packed. Spare room just in case, probably for water and such. Cameras, tanks, batteries, parts, some paint, extra hat, sunscreen, super glue, lots of it. And still room to take my daughter to her job.